But what makes science fiction great is the philosophy, the thinking, the ideas, the speculation.
Yes.
Speculative fiction.
Looking at things in a different way, using science, kind of extrapolate it. You take an idea, let's say invisibility. How would you do that? And just extrapolate it.
Cinematic fantastic.
Atu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Hello and welcome to the 20th and last episode of Cinematic Fantastic Season 1. We are not going to be kept to one season, by the way. We've got more stuff to come.
Wait, I'm glad you said, the way you said it, you said, this is the last episode of Season 1. And for a second I was going, I just heard somebody's mind going, no! And you know what? This goes out to you, Mr. Person who said no in their head, because you're absolutely right. William's right. We got more to come.
So much more great quality content to brighten up your day with the amazingness of me and my father.
Yep. It's cinematic and it's fantastic, and it's coming to you live and in living color of sound.
The sound is full of color. So, first of all, I wanted to give a small little retrospective of how our season's gone. So, first, we covered the first, or at least one of the firsts, if there was a first, science fiction movie by George Méliès. And then we explored a bit of the 1920s and early horror movies, German Expressionism, and the Lost World's outstanding stop motion. And then we covered a big handful of 1932's works, including Universal and non-Universal horror films, some adventure movies, some of the greats of the early 1930s, and some stinkers too. One in particular.
Yeah.
And we've seen movies grow and develop new techniques, King Kong being the biggest development overall. And I believe that this is a good thing because, all of this development is for the cause of, making better stories and, facilitating creativity to show, whatever you wanted. Tell the most grandiose of stories in the entire world. King Kong obviously getting the kudos for that. I mean, who would imagine that you could display a gorilla on screen as if it actually existed before CGI even existed, man?
Well, also, I would not overlook the cinematic achievements of the Unchained Camera, the compositing that George Méliès used that I think a lot of other directors and producers and special effects guys and gals would owe their existence to. So we're looking at the early days yet, and they're learning how to tell stories using sound and music and special effects to do that, and it never stops. It just keeps going. I think that they're taking themselves pretty seriously now. They're looking at it very much so, looking at it as an art form. I think, but they're also looking to entertain. How do we entertain people? So we're still in the early days. We have a lot of directors, producers, writers expressing science fiction as a kind of a darker side of it, a warning, fears and things like that. We get that going forward, in science fiction, but I think that as we go,
this does get superimposed with, cool aliens, and they have bug eyes and laser rays, pew pew.
That does bring forward more the entertainment and things like that. There are some elements that are going to come in, I think, in the future in the future of science fiction where, they can explore some of those deeper elements, but you can see where they're trying to entertain, and whereas they might like to be taken seriously. I think the further you go, most times they're just like, this is just a crazy situation. Is it scientifically plausible? Not really, but is it entertaining? Yes.
And even still, in the early days of Méliès and stuff, movies were literally just art. That's all they were. And nowadays, it's, transformed more into entertainment, and in particular, money. So, a lot of that comes from the popcorn that you can sell. I mean, the prices on popcorn are crazy at movie theaters for a reason. So, but now, we are covering a tale by the science fiction juggernaut, at least in my opinion, H.G. Wells, the Invisible Man.
The Invisible Man.
Yes, and do not confuse with the 2020 version. We're doing of the movie. We're doing the 1933 The Invisible Man, and there's been a lot more search results for the 2020 version. I think it's because, I think Universal are, trying to, reprise their monster movies. I think they made a Mummy movie, that one stank. They made a Dracula movie, that one stank. And I think they also made a Frankenstein, and it stank.
There was Dracula Untold, and it wasn't very popular. It was kind of telling the story of, Dracula when he was Vlad Tepes the Impaler, and they were kind of connecting up the vampire legend.
And Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, I would not say is part of Universal's deal to kind of... The thing that they started doing, like in 2015, they started trying to do this. They thought, okay, well, we're one of the first ones to do a kind of a cinematic universe because of the connection between Frankenstein and Wolfman, and then House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, I think was what it's called. Those are kind of monster mash kind of movies where you have different creatures and characters from the Universal Studios monster movies kind of interacting.
The foundations of Halloween as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they were thinking, we can do a cinematic universe. Everybody and their mama wanted to do a cinematic universe. They're even talking about doing a G.I. Joe cinematic universe.
Especially with Marvel on the table.
Oh, Marvel inspired all of that. They were like, oh, wow, cinematic universe, we have to do that. So their first foray into it was 2017's The Mummy. They kind of pulled in Dracula Untold, kind of like, it's like they saw him in the back of the room and went, oh, come on, you can be part of our gang, you can be part of our deal here. And he's like, what? I didn't know I was part. Yeah, you're part of this. So I don't think it was really part of it, but they kind of went, yeah, it is. The Mummy 2017 was not great. It really wasn't. I have fonder memories for the Boris Karloff version and the one with Brendan Fraser from '99. Those are much more true to the spirit, I think, in some ways, of The Mummy. Of course, it's more of an adventure tale in 1999. Anyway, the point is, they tried and they failed. They really did. They had, I think they were going to have Johnny Depp be the Invisible Man. It didn't work out. When they didn't see the return from The Mummy, they were like, well, maybe this isn't the best idea. They even took a photo of all the actors that were possibly going to be in these things. They did remake The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, and the special effects, some of that is really well done. So they remade that, but that didn't. It was very much an homage to the Universal stuff, and we'll talk about that when we get to Wolfman next season. But to kind of keep it on point here and on track, the Invisible Man, the recent one that they did in 2020, was more about the victim of the Invisible Man, and it wasn't a serum, it was a suit, and this suit kind of had some scientific basis. It basically, anything that it saw in front of it, or behind it, it would project on the front skin of it, so he's completely invisible.
And from what I can tell, I guess they didn't, take much of the story. They just took, the formula. They took, how about we have, an Invisible Man as a hitman? Maybe he's trying to, kill some people.
Well, in this, he's, in the new Invisible Man, he has faked his own death and made it look like his wife is crazy or something. And she keeps seeing a ghost or seeing him in the house. it's kind of like he's stalking her. So it kind of is more about her as the victim and turning it around and going, well, I'm going to fight back. And so it made the Invisible Man a kind of a scary, almost like a slasher a villain. Like oh my goodness, where's the Invisible Man? He could kill me. That's kind of what made that well done. And it
But
was
that wasn't really the point of the Invisible Man.
No, it wasn't. We're going to see quite a few H.G. Wells movies going forward. The Shape of Things to Come, or Things to Come.
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds in the 1950s. We've got Time Machine. Oh, Time Machine is a real favorite of mine. There's also one called, I don't think we're going to see it, but it's called Food of the Gods. It's about animals that eat this feed that makes them gigantic. So you got giant rats and giant creatures and all this kind of stuff. It's really creepy. But I can't think of any other H.G. Wells stuff off the top of my head. But I do know that we did a little bit of H.G. Wells stuff when we did Trip to the Moon. Had some H.G. Wells inspiration. Anyway,
Yeah.
Invisible Man was written in 1897, so quite a few years for people to be having known that it existed and read it.
And even still, the basis for like the idea of the Invisible Man, H.G. Wells got it from Plato's Republic. You know that it was because in that book, I think there's like 3 books, and it's just like one book, 3 novels or 3 or 4, I guess a couple, and in one of them there is a little part where there's a ring of invisibility. From using it, the main character gets the idea that with being undetectable you could do literally anything. Steal, murder, anything, and you'd get the freedom with the invisibility, and that freedom would give you godliness. And that's probably what planted the seed into him. Overall, it seems H.G. Wells was pretty fond of Plato's Republic in his adolescence from reading it.
He's a philosopher at heart, which I think a lot of the
Plato is a philosopher, so he has good ideas. And then H.G. Wells goes, these are good ideas, and then he takes them for the science fiction, and the philosophy is still there.
H.G. Wells is a philosopher as well, is what I meant. He had a lot of ideas, about politics and all these kind of things. He interweaved it into his stories. Like the haves and the have-nots. You have the ones who are tread underfoot. That's the Morlocks. You got the Morlocks and the Eloi. You've got this interplay of class system, and so he tried. The best science. It reminds me of Star Trek. The way Star Trek tried to display these elements about politics and people and how we interplay with each other, and put that into a science fiction. Put those elements into that world. So again, H.G. Wells, very heady and philosophical. He kind of couches it in a science fiction story, like let's say War of the Worlds. If you think about it, I think it's a commentary on colonialism, because the British people are the ones being attacked by these giant, tripod
Creatures,
aliens. They're mechs. They're like mechs with aliens inside them. And the shoe's on the other foot now. I think we've talked about this before, but the shoe's on the other foot now, and now you're the ones being colonized.
That is why I say that he's a science fiction juggernaut, because he pioneered a ton of science fiction stuff, and like all the philosophies as well that he had, and he put it into there, spread it out into the world. That's what he was, most known for. He did do some nonfiction stuff as well, but his science fiction work definitely makes him a science fiction juggernaut.
And a lot of the ideas that he had, he really made you think, and it wasn't just, oh, here's a spooky story, or oh, here's an interesting tale. Like a lot of the pulp writers, I hate to say, but a lot of the pulp writers of the 30s and 40s, even the 50s, it was a lot about entertainment and how can we, excite, the readers. And usually the readers were young boys,
But what makes science fiction great is the philosophy, the thinking, the ideas, the speculation.
Yes.
Speculative fiction.
Looking at things in a different way, using science, kind of extrapolate it. You take an idea, let's say invisibility. How would you do that? and just extrapolate it.
But the thing is, this movie is not very science fiction-y at all. They really do seem to suck that out.
Well, yeah. Well, let's put it this way. I think that you have to do a little bit of what's called verisimilitude. Verisimilitude means a simulation of truth or an appearance of truth. Does it look right? Does it sound right? So they're using terms like they're using atomic. They're using words about molecules, chemicals, real or imagined. It sounds scientifically plausible, so you kind of buy into it, and your suspension of disbelief kind of goes out the window, and you go, hey, this could possibly happen. But there's, of course, the science of the Invisible Man kind of breaks down when you really think about it. But, I think there's been some commentary that light passing through someone, in order for you to see, light has to hit the back of your eyeball, I guess your retina or whatever it is, your cornea. I don't know, what's the back? This thing has to hit the back of your eye and bounce back forward for you to see anything. Otherwise, you'd be blind. And because light is supposed to come in through a small point on your eye, if light is coming through all of your eye, you would be overwhelmed by the amount of light coming in. I think that in the book they do talk about
a lot of that stuff, and we get the Invisible Man. Also, he talks about how apparently all flesh and blood and all that stuff is actually transparent, but it just refracts and reflects enough light so that we can see it. But if you make it stop reflecting and refracting like as much, then it becomes, transparent. Talking about, for instance, if you put water in paper, then the paper becomes transparent because it doesn't reflect and refract, apparently.
Yeah, he uses some scientific elements, and you kind of, okay, you just buy into it. Don't think about it too much, and just have a good time.
Obviously, the movie doesn't do this.
No, it doesn't. And the movie has a story that it's wanting to tell. And yeah, it's not as heady as the book is. The book is a little bit more, it kind of goes more into Griffin, or the main character. It goes into his plan for what he's going to do or wants to do with these abilities that he's given himself due to the invisibility serum. So with that said, let's make the production of this movie visible by focusing on it and bringing it into focus. All right, so now Dracula came out in 1931, and it was a success, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. So Universal was going, okay, some people were thinking, okay, so what do we want to do next? I think, am I right? It was Robert Florey was involved. Was he later involved with Rue Morgue?
I
maybe
think so.
Maybe I'm thinking crazy. Maybe you can look that up or whatever. But two people, Richard Shayer and Robert Florey, they were talking to Universal about an adaptation of The Invisible Man, probably about as early as 1931, so a little bit after Dracula, because they saw it was very popular. But it didn't really catch Carl Laemmle and Carl Laemmle Jr.'s attention. They were kind of going more they were thinking more about Frankenstein, because they had some stuff on the table ready to go there.
Oh, he was on Murders of the Rue Morgue, yes.
I kept thinking Robert Florey and Murders of the Rue Morgue. I guess I was right. I just kept putting those two things together for some reason, and I couldn't tell why. So, and of course, they did make Frankenstein. But that didn't mean that while they were doing that, they weren't trying to push those things. And the details of this movie and how they tried to make it were crazy. Okay, they went back and forth with several writers, several directors, maybe
several actors for the Invisible Man himself, including Boris Karloff. He's so good. They're just like, we've got to get him for this role as well, even though he doesn't seem the very sciencey kind of type.
He pulled out. He's played mad scientists later on in his career. So he's not just the outcast, monster. He's played scientist a lot. But to sum it up, after all the stuff that Boris Karloff went through, he finally ended up, I think he was asking for I think this was after Frankenstein when they finally were getting him to try to be an Invisible Man, and he wanted more money than I think that they were willing to pay. I think because the guy knew his worth. I mean, he saw what Frankenstein was doing, buku bucks. So he asked for a little bit more, and they were like, I don't know if we can do that. While Frankenstein was being filmed, they did buy the rights to Invisible Man from H.G. Wells for about $10,000, which is a paltry sum now.
Adjust it for inflation.
Adjusted for inflation. He did want script approval, which means that anytime they made a change in the script or they updated it, they had to send him a copy, and he get the final look-see.
And this movie, it does really seem really like the book. I mean, you can see all the events out there. All they do is really simplified it. But who am I to tell? The version I read was the Great Illustrated Classics version, and that one is obviously simplified, but
it's abridged.
It's abridged somewhat, but another thing is that when you go into the actual book, then you go and you see a bunch of archaic language, and for me being a child, I probably would not have read it, concerning it. Even still now, I'm reading it and I'm like, what do these words mean, in this context of the time?
Yeah, it's expanding your vocabulary too.
The Great Illustrated Classics version, it gets rid of that archaic language into something that you can understand as a child. And I just loved this book as a child. I also had The War of the Worlds. I still have both of them. The Great Illustrated Classic version of Invisible Man and War of the Worlds. And I just love those so much. That's what got me into science fiction. And it's just, this was also the first old Universal movie that I watched with my dad, was The Invisible Man, because I was like, when I knew that there was a movie to this book that I loved, then I was like, hey, can we watch it? And, I was a nerd from childhood.
So did we not watch that when we went on vacation? Was this the time we went on vacation down to Florida, and I had it on the laptop, and I hooked it up to the TV? Well, we did watch it.
Yeah.
We did watch it while we were down there. Yeah.
We did watch it while we were down there.
Mom was like, they're killing people. I don't know if he should see this, which I thought was funny. But yeah, I do remember those illustrated classics. I read those when I was a kid too. So those have been out for quite a while. There's a lot, but they get you hooked in. And I think eventually you can, if you want to, you can graduate up to reading the actual books, because there's a lot more of the text there.
And that's what I've been doing, because the Great Illustrated Classics version gets rid of a ton of other stuff as well. But yeah, if you want to introduce your child to, nerdy stuff, maybe grab them a copy of, The Invisible Man Great Illustrated Classics. Just the idea of the Invisible Man is a really great idea. So it's a good read.
I think you can get a lot of those in a big set for not a lot of money either. I mean, they're really inexpensive. I think you could probably find those for really good. Anyway, I think we don't get any money from selling those as part of our patronage or whatever. You can buy those. We won't get a penny. We promise we're not a shill for them. We promise. So. It went from director to director. It eventually ended up in James Whale's hands.
They did cycle it through a lot of, Frankenstein people, as well as, the Invisible Man being, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, I think, Colin Clive, a ton of other people as well. They're just like, who do we want to use for this? It could honestly be anyone, concerning that he's invisible. So it's very confusing.
It is. One of the writers, they had seen a play that he did. They were like, okay, we really like that.
I'm going to make a version that, incorporates some of this book and some of this book that I've been having ideas about. And, incorporated it. And then H.G. Wells was like, that's too far. Don't do that.
He's like, how about you? I bet you he was thinking, good show, sir, but how about you incorporate some of my novel that I wrote rather than that 1931 novel by Philip Wiley called The Murder Invisible. Can you please not use that one? Why don't you use the one I wrote?
Grand Central Station is not grand in my imagination.
Yes.
I don't think it probably was around when he wrote the book, but who knows? I think radio was in its infancy when he also wrote that. So, and this movie heavily features radio. So,
Yeah, it's modernized for the time. But the Murder Invisible was a book by Philip Wiley. Of course, Philip Wiley wrote another book called called Gladiator, which is actually some elements in that inspired the character of Superman. Some of those early pulp, superhero characters that had great strength and great agility. Anyway, so there was some stuff in the book like an invisible octopus, invisible rats, something about blowing up Grand Central Station, like William talked about. So there were script issues, and they went back and forth on what do we want to put in this. Some directors would I mean, James Whale pulled out at some point because he did not want to be pigeonholed into being a horror director because of Frankenstein.
And he tried to, direct other stuff as well, I think, but then that didn't do so well.
Oh, they didn't do so hot.
He retreated back into the pigeonhole.
It's not a pigeonhole. He's good at it.
He knows where his goodness is at, I guess.
He has a good eye for it, and I think that when you're good at something, rather than, pull away from it, it's good to lean into it,
You've got to have an eye for this stuff, but it also has to bounce into your eye and not be invisible. So anyway, yeah, Claude Rains ended up for this role, I think.
Yes, he did.
And then we also have Gloria Stewart, who we saw in The Old Dark House. I think it was just The Old Dark House.
Yes, I'm not sure if we see Gloria Stewart again, but we did see some of James Whale's stuff. We saw him do Frankenstein. We saw him do The Old Dark House. So we kind of know what his skill is with angles and with introduction of characters and suspense and making you feel for that. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, William, and probably before you even get to the plot, I'll mention this. A grandfather clock gets knocked down in both movies.
Yes. I guess it symbolizes James Whale. James Whale is the grandfather clock, and he is about to go crash and burn.
I think he's saying it's about time for me to knock down a clock. So
okay.
That's terrible. All right, so there were multiple drafts of this, and Wells kept rejecting drafts. Whale came back, and then he left again. And then I think that they had a loss of money on some different stuff in between Frankenstein and The Invisible Man. And some other things came up. Like, I think while they were waiting for The Invisible Man to kind of get visible, or this project come into focus, they did The Old Dark House. And he did really well with that. It's still, I think the fact that Karloff was doing really well caused him to ask for more money. When they eventually got Claude Rains, this was his first American. Well, I'll talk about Claude Rains in just a minute. It's really interesting to learn about him. He actually was on stage, and he did one silent movie, but he did some stage work. But his gravelly kind of voice that he has, that he's famous for, he didn't always have that. He actually had a very thick Cockney accent. Oh, right, go. I cannot do a Cockney accent. It's terrible. But if you look it up, you know what a Cockney accent sounds like. It's very hard to understand what they're saying if you don't understand the specifics of the slang and the where you're and if you haven't grown up in that area, it's hard to pick up what they're saying. But he also had a little bit of a speech impediment and a stutter. So once he got over and through those, especially from voice training, and he learned his craft very early on.
And we would definitely know that he sounds very good. His voice is amazing. And that's why they chose him, because he's invisible and he's covered up in a mummy wrapping. It wouldn't matter what he looks like. It just matters that his voice is good.
Yeah, while they were filming, Claude Rains asked James Whale to let him act more emotionally. Ask him if he could try to express something with his eyes. And Whale said...
That would be very difficult.
Whale said, "But Claude, old fellow, what are you going to do it with? You haven't any face." So you're absolutely invisible.
Plus you have goggles that go over your eyes. So, and how do you emote with your eyes if they're covered up? You can't emote with a big block of goggle.
Yeah, and James Whale, the director, he didn't fully tell all the details of the role to Claude Rains. I think that he's trying to not, scare him off the role or kind of say, well, they're going to basically get your body movements, your head and arms and all that, and your hands and all that positioning, your voice. They're going to get that. That's how you're going to emote your character through that, because they can't see you. But he's an actor's actor. I would say that Gloria Stewart did say that he was a difficult actor to be with because he took it very seriously. And of course, not to say she didn't either, but he was probably, he could have been very a perfectionist. He could have going, I can do that better, or keep pushing himself. And it was a craft to him. It was something you also worked at. It's something that you found, as you pushed into these roles. And when you have somebody like that, it's not easy to work near them sometimes because of their drive. But honestly, it makes you a better actor. A lot of people that have been around Claude Rains had nothing but great things to say about him as a craftsman. So some of the other actors that were in this, I don't know. The guy who played Dr. Kemp, I don't know a lot of his works. It lists on Wikipedia, it lists a lot of stuff that he's been in. I don't know a lot of the stuff that he's been in. I do know that the guy who played Dr. Cranley, who was Flora Cranley's dad, and I think that guy right there, I think he plays... Wait, he did... I don't know of anything else that he was in, but I think... Give me a second here. Yes, he's Henry Travers, played him. And he played a very famous character. If anybody has ever watched TNT or Turner Classic Movies or whatever about Christmas, there's a movie that gets played every Christmas. Do you know what it is?
It's a Wonderful Life.
Thank you. And he plays Clarence the Angel, Clarence Oddbody, the angel who he helps Jimmy Stewart's character.
I still have yet to watch that movie, just so you know. We can watch it anytime, I guess.
We can, yeah. He's depressed. Jimmy Stewart wants to jump off a bridge. And who would show up but Clarence? Oh, Clarence. Clarence Oddbody, an angel. He's trying to earn his wings. He needs to do a good deed here on earth and help a weary soul who needs his help. And he makes a deal with Jimmy Stewart's character to let Jimmy Stewart's character see something, to let him see something that changes his life and maybe lets him think that it is a wonderful life.
And in the case of the VeggieTales movie, of which that I have watched and also enjoyed, which was also based on It's a Wonderful Life, the RKO version, at least I think it's RKO, the one that we're talking about, that would be seeing him in the future with a spray cheese business, I guess.
There is a business, yes, and he does have a future.
He does forget, his family as well for that role, so it makes him rethink his life choices and go, better relationship with my family, I guess.
Yes. In answer to the special effects, they started filming in, I'm going to say this is going to be crazy. You probably won't believe this, but principal photography of the movie began at the end of June and concluded in late August. That's like 3 months. I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad.
I mean, I guess you're filming an invisible person, so you don't have much to film, but ching.
The special effects, though, took another 2 months to do.
That would make sense.
And it was done in secrecy. They said that it had something to do with mirrors. They told the public that because they didn't want to tell them how they did the special effects.
Yeah, because when the public could watch it later, they would go like, "There's floating objects, doing things," and they would not know that this was possible or how they did it until watching the movie. And nowadays we know that this was accomplished with, maroon screen, green screen but maroon. And strings.
Here's what they did. They took the set, right, and they covered it completely in black velvet because it's non-reflective. It's not shiny. They did that with it, and it had a full bodysuit, like a body stocking kind of thing, made out of black velvet, and they had the little eye holes. That's all he could see out of. Of course, they had to go back and erase the eyes, out of the shots. But that's how they did those. They filmed it twice, like once with the set, once in the regular area, and once with the other set that was covered with velvet. They also used automatic opening doors, and I guess the whole fishing line. They usually use fishing line to have like objects float through. So they used a kind of a combination of that kind of thing. But the reception of it was very good. It did break records at some of the New York locations and also Los Angeles. Now, here's the thing. This movie has, quote, sequels, and yes, we're going to watch them. These sequels have little to nothing of the barest tissue to connect it to this original. They usually use the name Griffin to connect him to the original character somehow, and they also use an invisibility serum. Other than that, most of them are not truly related to the original. We're going to watch them anyway. They're not as good, I would say. They're okay. There's even one that's kind of more of a comedy called The Invisible Woman. Universal still considers that part of this series, but that's a little bit of a stretch at best. There's also a Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man.
Abbott and Costello is usually where the monster movie sagas end, from what I can tell, because they did those series, and I think they also did the House of series as well, and then that capped off the Universal monster movie era. They
started going more into aliens and UFOs and stuff like that, because that's what captured the mind of the public at the time, is UFOs and aliens and green moon men from Mars. I don't know.
Yeah. So I would also like to speak about a tiny little portion of this podcast, which also happens to be a tiny portion of the film. The music.
Yeah.
That was like 10 minutes long. Well, I guess it was because, RoccoW had, King Kong out, or was about to pull it out, who knows, and Universal's kind of playing catch-up, but next season, we would be able to see Universal catch up to it as well. I will deluge that it is the Black Cat of 1934 that we're starting with next season.
Yes, and of course, at the end of the podcast, I'll ask you if you want to tell them what we have in store. We'll throw some of the names of the movies that we're going to be reviewing in the next season. Plus, we'll talk about some special bonus features that we're gonna do in between season.
Yes, I have been trying to keep it hush hush, but yeah, this is our plan to do bonus episodes. Our first little batch of them are going to be after the season ends, in between seasons. But yeah, we're going to have some juicy bonus episodes with some bonus movies that we're going to cover in the theming of months. So we're going to have, a batch of 4 movies and call it a month, and probably release it in a month as well. So look forward to that. It's going to be pretty cool. As you're saying with the reception.
Yeah, the reception was very well. It did open plenty of doors for Claude Rains, because this was his first role. He would definitely get some more roles out of this. Let's talk about Claude Rains for just a moment, and then I'll go into what some of the movies are that we're actually going to be seeing him in again. All right, so Claude Rains, of course, his full name is William Claude Rains. He was born in 1889. If you notice that's like, the Invisible Man would have been written, probably he would have been able to pick it up, at being 9 years old. He probably would have been able to pick it up if it would have been for, kids. So he's a British actor. He's been in a lot of stuff that we would know. He was in Invisible Man, 1933. He was in The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938. As Prince John. We will see him there. He's also in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington in 1939, which stars, oh my goodness, okay. I'm going to have to say it because everybody's going to kill me for, it's Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, The Wolfman in 1941. I know that role very well. He plays Lon Chaney Jr.'s father. Lon Chaney Jr. plays Lawrence Talbot, and he plays his father, Sir John. That's his father. He's also in Casablanca, which has Humphrey Bogart, who Casablanca also has Conrad Veidt.
Conrad Veidt, we last saw him in the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yes.
It has been so long.
It has been.
We've seen him.
Plus, Claude Rains is also in a movie called King's Row. And King's Row, I know that movie because the opening theme to it
sounds like Star Wars.
Sounds like Star Wars. Yeah, you have to look it up on YouTube if you don't believe me.
Yeah, we'll just hum it for you. It should be as easy as, going instead of da 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 da. Instead it goes dun 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 dun, and then stays on that one note, and then it continues. So John Williams stole a lot. It's inspiration. He stole from the best. Public domain. Right. This is probably like 1940s, so it's really old.
Right, exactly. I don't know how long. I think Lawrence of Arabia is actually like 2.5 to 3 hours. Lawrence of Arabia with Peter O'Toole, he was in that. And he also was in The Greatest Story Ever Told with Max von Sydow as Jesus Christ. In The Greatest Story Ever Told, that came out in 1965. And
who did Claude Rains play?
King Herod.
Ah.
Yeah.
I guess that would make sense. A little bit.
Yeah. Also, he won a Tony Award of course, Tony Awards are presented for people for their stage acting. He's also a 4-time nominee as Best Supporting Actor for an Academy Award for many different roles.
Obviously not the Invisible Man, concerning that he plays the titular role.
Now, he grew up very poor. And this is the sad part.
And it's also kind of fitting as well, because the Invisible Man also was a poor scientist.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's something I didn't know. So
we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Yeah,
I find that interesting.
Yeah, so he had many different brothers and sisters. But due to hunger issues at the time, and the lifestyle everybody led, they all passed away, and all he was left with was just three siblings. 2 other siblings are all that's left. Him and the other 2. It was a miracle that we even have Claude Rains. So he had a speech impediment and a very thick Cockney accent. In fact, his daughter sometimes he would go back into his Cockney accent to do old songs or old stories he would tell in that Cockney accent, and she said she couldn't tell what he was saying. So his father was an actor, and when he was little, he would spend a lot of time in the theaters, and he was surrounded by actors, stagehands, people behind the scenes. He saw actors as well as the day-to-day running of the theater, like what it took to make that thing go. He did go to America in 1912. He knew that there were some New York theaters that were offering a lot. But whenever World War I came, he was like, hey, America's great, but I love England. I'm going to serve her in the London Scottish Regiment, along fellow actors Basil Rathbone, Ronald Colman, Herbert Marshall, and Cedric Hardwicke. I've seen Cedric Hardwicke, I think, once, but Basil Rathbone, I know him very well. And this is what I know him as. I think he plays the Sheriff of Nottingham in The Adventures of Robin Hood, starring Errol Flynn. And this movie we are going to do. It is considered an adventure movie, if you want, or a fantasy, if you want to do that, because I don't think Robin Hood really existed in the form that he did in the book. That's a hot take. But Basil Rathbone also played, I believe, Sherlock Holmes many times. So there you go, man. There's one of your favorite characters. Okay, so there was in World War II, there was a gas attack. I'm sorry, World War I. World War I, they used like gases to attack people. They used these bombs with gas in them.
Chlorine bombs, yeah.
Yeah, in this case, it was, I don't know what gas it was, but he lost 90% of the vision in his right eye, and he had vocal cord damage as well, which might have lended credence to the thought that that's where he got his gravelly voice. After the war ended, he went back, he stayed in England. He continued acting there. He got rid of his Cockney accent, speech impediment.
But not so much his gravelly voice. I mean, you can hear his gravelly voice, especially when we have the Invisible Man in his fury.
That's what I remember him as. I never heard him before the gravel.
And a really good place where you can also hear his gravelly voice. Skip all the way to the beginning of the episode. Remember where you are right now. We have as part of our intro right now, one of the clips is of the Invisible Man saying, "I'll show you what I am and who I am and what I am."
What I am. Yeah.
And from that, you can hear how gravelly his voice is. It's so easy. Technology, man. Just boop, boop, and you're done.
You know, he not only knows what he's doing, he taught others how to do it. And John Gielgud and Charles Lawton, a.k.a. Dr. Moreau, Quasimodo, too.
But Dr. Moreau, again, The Island Dr. Moreau, written by H.G. Wells, to get the picture.
Right.
That was also one of his
That's
best.
another connection.
The Invisible Man, War of the Worlds, and The Island Dr. Moreau were among his best.
So Sir John Gielgud, a very famous actor, he said, "The London stage suffered a great loss when Claude Rains deserted it for motion pictures, but when I see him now on the screen and remember him, I must admit that the London stage's loss was the cinema's gain, and the striking virtuosity that I witnessed as a young actor is now there for audiences everywhere to see for all time." I'm so glad of that.
Yeah, people really liked this dude. Much later, he would, be known for one of the finest actors of the 20th century.
Yes, absolutely. But I will tell you this: his first screen test for a movie, for RoccoW, it was not great. But when he did The Invisible Man, he was overheard in the next room. They heard him do it, and they said that voice, because in a way, isn't that the best way to get a screen test of The Invisible Man? Because you're not being seen, you're being heard. So I thought that was great. That's a great way for someone to notice him.
And as a note, this movie does make a little use of voiceovers. Obviously, they use this, they can and have been able to insert, audio into a movie from probably the inception. Maybe even that's how they actually make sound film, is they take the audio from the camera and they put it into the film and mix it around and stuff. But yeah, they do make some use of voiceovers, especially for the Invisible Man and the radio in this movie as well, which I find interesting because, as you can hear, it's not directional noise. It's coming from like the screen overall, the camera. So that's because it's a voiceover doing the radio work.
Right, absolutely. So, and of course, Claude Rains' agent was a family friend of Carl Laemmle, but who wasn't a family friend of Carl Laemmle or a
He
family?
established many relations with all sorts of people, relations as in friendships.
Well, he also a lot of his family members worked in the biz. Remember that there was that poem where something about they were rhyming the word "family" with Laemmle.
yeah.
Right, because everybody was related to him somehow or another. So he signed a multi-picture deal with Warner Brothers to be able to be loaned out to other studios, about $750,000 over 7 years. Okay, so he played. Okay, there's an actress that he was a good friend that he worked with, who he met when she was very young, starting out acting. Her name was Betty Davis. She's very, very famous actress. But he did his role of Prince John in The Adventures of Robin Hood. He portrayed it kind of like her. He did it kind of an older, effeminate woman is how he played it. Also, The Adventures of Robin Hood's co-director Michael Curtis kind of taught him a lot about film acting, what to do and what not to do in front of the camera, more of what not to do. So he's been in a lot of stuff. He also played Eric in The Phantom of the Opera, a remake of the 1920s movie, and that came out in 1943. Now, a lot of the people that knew him remembered him very well, and knew that he was very dedicated to his craft. He knew the whole script upside down and sideways. He did pass away in 1967 at the age of 77. He was a chronic alcoholic. He had cirrhosis of the liver. It's sad that when we talk about actors at the end of their career, we do have sometimes they just pass away. Sometimes they pass away of really horrible things that happened. On his tombstone, which he designed himself, it says, "All things once are things forever. Soul, once living, lives forever." Of course, we're going to see him again. We saw him in The Invisible Man. We're going to see him again in 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood as Prince John in The Wolfman. We're also, just to let you know, we're not going to watch this one, but there was a remake of The Lost World. He played Professor Challenger. That was in 1960.
Pretty cool. Another person that Dad also mentioned on this film was Una O'Connor. Now, from watching this movie, I don't know if this is exactly her fault or her personality, or if she, did this specifically for this movie, or if this is her personality. But at least in this movie, she's the most annoying character ever.
Yes.
She wails over everything, and we can play clips here.
Yes, please, play it.
Your ears have now disappeared. They have become invisible because of the absolute, wailing. She wails for no reason. I mean, she's worried over her husband, as we'll see later.
It's over the top. It is over the top.
It's very over the top.
She's not. This is not common in her acting roles, but I do think when she did stuff for Universal, she did really lay it on thick.
But yeah, she would be the Adventures of Robin Hood. She would also be in Bride of Frankenstein, as well. And, she also, it says in 2020, was listed number 19 on the Irish Times list of Ireland's greatest film actors. We've talked about this once before, unless I was talking about Scotland's, if they even have a version. But yeah, this was Irish. Una O'Connor was Irish, and even her last name before she changed it was MacLeod, which sounds very Irish.
They're both Irish.
They're both Irish.
So there's a couple cameos in this to point out. Dwight Fry.
We do get Dwight Fry. In fact, here are all of his lines.
Can you tell us what plans you've got for capturing him? Yes, I know, but have you any special secret means of getting him? Why not put wet tar on all the roads, then chase the black soles of his feet?
Yeah.
He does barely get a little spot in this movie, but they're like, you know what? Dwight Fry from Dracula and Frankenstein, those were very popular. Dracula plays more of a role as being one of the main characters, at least in my opinion, in my heart. But they threw him in here because he's like, we could get someone popular. Hey, let's get Dwight Fry. Maybe he's probably up for it, I guess. And they did that.
Yeah, of course he was. But there's a famous actor, Walter Brennan. He played, as one of his very first roles, he played the man whose bike was stolen and thrown on people. John Carradine played a villager. He's also in Bride of Frankenstein, uncredited. But he has played a lot of horror and science fiction roles over the years, mostly scary stuff. He played Dracula in House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. And he was the first Hollywood actor to succeed Bela Lugosi in playing the Count. I don't think he'll ever be as good as, to be honest, as Bela Lugosi, because Bela Lugosi is Dracula in my heart. So he'll never be replaced as far as that's concerned. The whole thing about The Invisible Man has been homaged. It's been the idea of that has been copied over.
It's a good idea.
Dozens.
Though.
It is
dozens of times, but it is a very great idea, though. It's just in the whole, source of it. It's just a really, really good idea, and you can get all sorts of, stuff from it. And from what I think of this movie, it kind of feels a bit like, James Whale did Frankenstein, kind of. It kind of seems a bit on the Frankenstein kind of lot. It sort of ends the same way as well, with something being burned down and a character dying later.
Right.
And The Invisible Man also does seem a bit more like Dr. Frankenstein, but Dr. Frankenstein is a bit less murderous, obviously.
Well, if you think about it, the murderousness of Frankenstein's creature or monster, whatever you want to call him, and Dr. Victor Frankenstein kind of smushed together. He is the object of his experimentation.
And it also does have a dame who is seeking love from a devoted and therefore distracted scientist.
And she's blonde.
And she's blonde-ish, yeah, so that also applies as well. And just overall, the book is better because, they flesh out the humanity of Griffin, his reasons, his motives, and, more importantly, how the circumstances changed him, and realistically as well. Instead, the movie simplifies his character and therefore his character arc, and also adds, obviously, manic comedy to him, where there was none. His character in this movie is a bit more hollow and more counted toward, being a universal monster. But he's a lot more in the book. He's much more complex of a character, Instead of, being like, I'll show you who I am, he's like, here you go, I'm invisible, whoop-de-doo, this is my circumstance. And, he does go a little bit insane, but he doesn't derail a train, if you get what I mean.
Right.
And he doesn't really laugh too much. I mean, he does get a little prankster fun in the book, but he's just so much more. His circumstances are what changes him to be, murderous. And, wanting a reign of terror, as well as, maybe influence of, the drugs he puts in his body and the potions. But the circumstances is what changes him to be a bit more, murderous of a character as compared to, the simplified version we get in this one. The book is better in this regard.
How would you compare Dr. Jekyll to Dr. Griffin? Because Dr. Jekyll, as Mr. Hyde, he's free. He can free to be as brutal and savage and as sinful as he can be.
Oh my goodness, we're getting into such a character study here. That's really good, really interesting.
But Dr. Griffin, it's almost as if no one can see me. It's like, but God can see you. But if no one can see me, then I am God.
Yeah.
I am the unseen thing that creeps upon you.
Because no one can see God either.
Right, God's unseen, and therefore, there's this whole element.
No one cares whatever you're doing, because you could go and do absolutely anything, and if people don't notice you, then you're good. You could even, walk around naked, because in order to actually be invisible, you'd have to do so, but no one would care. Because obviously you're invisible. So you just get the freedom to do whatever you want, and you therefore become a god. The Plato's Republic idea.
Yes, but there are downsides scientifically, like you have to wait a couple hours after eating before you can go out, or else everybody's going to see this floating glop or whatever. There's actually a movie called The Memoirs of an Invisible Man that's more of a modern take on it. That special effects are more modern, and he gets his atomic structure shifted in phase, so it's out of phase with reality.
They would also do this in Star Trek, I think.
They would, yes.
Was that the original series or Next Generation?
Next Generation.
Next Generation, yeah. But yeah, they did that. That was
awesome.
Idea.
But in Memoirs of Invisible Man, he eats Chinese food, and he looks into the mirror and sees himself digesting the Chinese food, and it makes him throw up, and you see him throw up in the mirror. It comes out. It's really weird. That whole movie is weird.
And especially, again, we'd also get more modern takes on this. Obviously, Harry Potter with the invisibility cloak also does a little bit of that, especially in the Chamber of Secrets. I think he plays with that a little bit more. Or that was Prisoner of Azkaban. I think he smuggles himself into Hogsmeade, I think, in the third movie, and he steals a lollipop, but he also gets some news by infiltrating into the teacher's lounge kind of place, I guess. But we won't spoil that for you. Go read Harry Potter.
It's really good. So this movie was, I think, very influential as far as special effects and story. Plus, we got introduced to the greatness that is Claude Rains. This is a very memorable movie for me. It was
also a very memorable movie and book for me as well.
Yes.
It's just really great. It's really great.
Yeah, and honestly, there's a lot more movies, I think, that are based off of books that we're going to be doing going forward. We will talk about some of the differences between the books and the movies as we go. Of course, to quote my wife, we will say this, even though we are talking about movies, my wife would say that the book is always better than the movie. And yeah, that's probably true, but we're also going to talk about the movie as its own art form and as with its own limitations as to getting the story across. And we're gonna give these things a fair shake. We're gonna look, if we talk about the Lord of the Rings, we're gonna talk about them as movies, how they use emotion to pull at your heartstrings.
And especially since there's, they do follow the plot, very faithfully. But in the plot section, I will cover some of the book differences, obviously being, I would want to do that.
So before we go into the plot section, I wanted to know, William, what are some memories, not necessarily like, you have to think of the greatest memory ever. What are some memories that you've had doing the podcast, some specific episodes that really kind of stood out to you as something either funny or weird that happened?
Well, I mean, memory is so weird, especially, being 7 months in the making. My memory is probably going to be really, difficult to access. So I'm probably going to start going backwards, I guess. King Kong was really fun as well, especially since I, got to do the DK rap, and we also studied a really cool movie. Son of Kong was actually, it was pretty fun as well. Avid, viewers would notice that it was released in the same week. We rushed it out. We worked on it on the same time, people. So, just so you know. And then
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was also pretty fun as well. And that's definitely a pretty good book. I'm still in the process of reading it. That's just because I stopped reading it. So
I liked that we had, kind of that in-depth. We really broke that movie down. I mean, even the religious aspects and the connections, and just we went really deep on the nature of evil and
sin
and
stuff.
sin and retribution and punishment and God, and it was deep. I liked when we did the monster walks in the old dark house, because not only did we get to see a really good movie example of a dark house kind of movie, we got to see one that was like a stinker.
And the Vampire Bat was pretty good too as
Yeah,
well.
it was. I liked talking about Dwight Fry's character, and I really feel bad for him in that, because he's not like he's Renfield, where he's maybe killing, or anything like that. There's a lot of depth to it, even though he dies very quickly. So,
and then the next notable ones I really like was obviously, The Most Dangerous Game. That was pretty
fun.
good as well. We also had some fun with the Huma Huma Nuku Nuku Applause.
Yes, we did.
Or that was the Island of Lost Souls.
Yeah, the Island of Lost Souls. I really liked talking about, some of those aspects of what's a beast and what's a man. I liked. There's different elements. Like I liked that you called him legendary in White Zombie. I liked. There's so much to like in where we went.
The Mummy was a really good episode as well. We had a lot of fun with that. Frankenstein obviously was pretty good. I think I had a bit more fun with Dracula though.
Yeah, and I liked when we had our guest on, my daughter Leia, on the Phantom of the Opera. That was really nice hearing from her.
The Lost World was pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
We got to talk about stop motion for the first time. Nosferatu was... Dad has this episode in his heart as his favorite.
It's kind of... it's a good place in my heart. There's a part where I was reading... out of the script from for the movie when Hutter is reading out of the book about vampires, and you played this really creepy music behind when I was talking on the podcast. I thought that was hilarious to me. And
the Durgolem and Cabinet Dr. Caligari, while a little bit forgettable, I guess, in terms of many of the other ones. Those were still great as well. They have a little bit stuff to them.
I still remember scenes from those movies, in my brain.
And I would gladly go rewatch them. In fact, I rewatched The Lost World for the Son of Kong episode to kind of compare them a little bit.
And you learned a lot about German Expressionism, though, too, which, you probably didn't know a lot. You may have known.
I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
So, and then, last of all, not in our hearts, but, our first episode. We had a lot of fun with that. I was new to podcasting, so, they goofed around a little bit. We were trying to test stuff out. But yeah, that was our first episode, and now we've just developed so much until then, and our content has gotten better.
We've definitely got a style down.
Even though there may not be so many people out there, listening to us. We don't have thousands yet, but I just feel like we make good content, not because of the people outside, but because, we like the content. We like making good content and, listening back on it and going, oh, I really enjoyed making this episode and, me editing this episode and, creating this wonderful podcast episode. And that's why we are doing this podcast.
Yeah, we're doing it for the love of it. It's great to have an audience that responds well. And we do have some dedicated fans, and I mean that they're very vocal about telling us what they like and what they don't, and how they felt when they watched it or listened to it, and that's what I like to hear. But honestly, I think the main reason why I started this, William, is to have something you and I could share together. I love film, and I love film from its inception, even from the oldest to the newest. And I would say 2 years ago, if I had said, hey, do you want to watch this older movie? You probably, I'm probably thinking, I don't want to say this, but you might have turned your nose up at it and been like, oh.
I had only watched, The Invisible Man, Frankenstein, and Dracula, but none of the others. So I wouldn't really, enjoy seeing old movies like this. I mean, for film fanatics, you can there's so much to appreciate. Just, if you really like film, don't, keep yourself to just watching, the latest stuff. There's a whole century of stuff that you can watch and appreciate and analyze. And for, filmophiles, you can go all the way back to, some goodies from 1920. If you wouldn't, revisit stuff, you could watch silent movies. If you prefer sound movies, try that out. It's pretty cool. Maybe there's a particular era you don't really know about. Maybe you don't know what RoccoW was like in the 40s, for instance. You could go and watch some stuff from that, analyze it, and go, wow, that's amazing. But, yeah, we've been going on for a while, and you'll tune in about, I don't know, 15 seconds, however long our break music is,
right,
for a plot of The Invisible Man that will appear before your eyes.
A detailed breakdown of the plot of Invisible Man. Also, William's going to talk about some of the similarities in the book and the differences in the book, and we could talk about how some of those scenes were portrayed in the movie and how they made us feel. So we're going to show you who we are and what we are. We are Cinematic Fantastic. We're going to go on break. We'll be back in just a moment with some more fun and frivolity.
Until then, see ya.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to the other half.
The final half of Cinematic Fantastic.
It's the final half of the finale. So if this wasn't the end, my friends, I don't know what is. No, but it's just the finale. And what it means is we have come to a milestone.
Remember what they said in the Monster Walks about age is a milestone?
Oh, no. He said millstone. Age is a millstone.
Yeah.
It's a milestone. See, the director didn't even stop him and go, it's a milestone, not a millstone.
They were pumping B movies out like crazy, but...
That was Poverty Road. This is not a B movie. This is a very influential...
Or is it? No one knows.
Invisible Man is a very influential movie. Many directors of both science fiction, thrillers, and horror, they all look back to this as very influential on their career.
And this tale, this, book and movie as together, I read this book in my childhood, absolutely loved it. War of the Worlds, read it in my childhood, absolutely loved it. Another thing, some other books as well as I read on while I'm going at it, I'll give you my childhood science fiction novels. Another thing is I read a couple of the William Sleater books.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're not as, philosophical as H.G. Wells, but they're science fiction.
Did you read Intergalactic Pig, or what's it called?
Interstellar Pig was a really good favorite of mine. It's, for those who don't know, basically, I hold it in my heart as the same as Invisible Man a little bit, but it is pretty high praise for a book that isn't so much high praise. In terms of childhood books, those two were the top two that I went to. So the Interstellar Pig is about, this teenager, he moves to somewhere, and there are odd neighbors who happen to have a board game they like.
It's called Jumanji. No, I'm kidding.
No, it's called Interstellar Pig.
Interstellar Pig, that was what it's called, yeah.
And as we will discover later in the book, the board game is actually real. So at the final part of the book, they have to, deal with the odd neighbors that are actually players of Interstellar Pig. And they, go on sort of like a manhunt, this teenager surviving for his life against, all the competitors playing this, game and dealing with the cards that they have. Another one of them that I also pretty liked was The Boy Who Reversed Himself. Which was basically a girl. She goes to school with this boy. This boy happens to have reversed himself completely, and then he pulls her into, this revelation and, of, traveling in this, fourth dimension. Really kooky idea.
The Green Futures of Tycho?
The Green Futures of Tycho, yes, was another pretty good one.
Yeah.
That one was about time travel, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was also, to me, it was also about, the relationships with siblings and that we have.
Basically, Dad was the one who fed me all these books from his childhood, and he liked them, and therefore I liked them. So
well, you liked them as a choice. I see. The thing is, with these movies that I'm showing you and these books, they're not. I don't want you to like them because I liked them.
I like them because
they're
like
good.
them.
Yeah,
they're good as well. And Interstellar Pig is a good read. If you feel like reading it.
Did you do Singularity?
I did much later. I think I read that one, a couple years ago.
I think Singularity was about the two brothers that were twins.
Yeah, the aging.
Yeah, he always wanted to be better than the other brother.
So he stayed in this cabin that was frozen in time so that he can age himself up. It's a pretty creepy novel.
It was kind of strange.
William Sleater, he has some of the pretty coolest ideas. So if you're looking for a science fiction author that's, got some out-of-this-world ideas, William Sleater is pretty good.
He's a little bit, there's some things like, oh, aliens ate my homework or something, or aliens in the attic. No. This guy, he doesn't write down to kids. He doesn't write down to people with a brain. He writes science fiction that children and young people can deal with, but it doesn't talk down to them. It doesn't go hey, you're dumb, so you don't understand deeper concepts. So I'm just going to go.
So from childhood and just overall recommendation, William Sleater, check him out. He's got some good stuff.
This has been the William Sleater Corner of the podcast. We're thinking of doing a spinoff called Interstellar Pod. No, I'm kidding. The podcast that reversed itself. We could do that.
The Green Futures of Podcast.
The Green Futures of Tycho Pod. I don't know.
Tide Pod. Don't eat those kids.
No, I'm kidding. No, but we can, as we go, we are going to also delve into literature, because many of the movies that we're watching have been inspired by books, by novels and things like that.
And
so,
I'm just giving you, my science fiction grounding as a child. Just for funsies. I enjoyed these books. You should enjoy them too. They're pretty good. So, as I promised, in the last segment, there are some differences from the book. There aren't too many, though. Overall, it's just simplification is what they did.
do you think it's pretty faithful? Would you say?
I feel like all the events are there. Maybe they changed around a little bit of things, and they overall simplified into a 1-hour format as compared to, a full novel. But yeah, I feel like it is pretty faithful. There are some things that are not faithful. Obviously, as this is the plot segment, we are spoiling The Invisible Man, the movie. If you want to watch it clean without spoilers, then heads up. We never give these, though, because we just assume that if we're going to do a plot, then we're going to spoil it. So
I think on Amazon there is actually there's a Invisible Man collection, which has the original Invisible Man and then the other movies that are tangentially connected by the smallest of threads, except for the word invisible, and made by Universal. But you can get all those. We are going to do all those movies on on this podcast. So if you get that copy of the DVD, you'll be set to watch the ones that we'll be doing probably in the next 2 seasons, maybe.
So if you organize a stakeout and you wait for the long haul, we'll have the full saga out. It'll be pretty cool. But some differences from The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells and The Invisible Man by James Whale.
Okay.
First of all, one of the first, things that happens in this movie, obviously we get, The Invisible Man in the inn. The book, extends the inn time for, many days, I think even like a month or two. As, you get Griffin working on his cure, but it's unsuccessful, and he also runs out of money, causing Miss Hall to kick him out because, you don't have the money. That does happen in this film, but they do shorten it down to 15 minutes.
They compress the time. I think they compress it over a day or two.
And he doesn't even, rob anyone, which was, the thing that also set off, to kick him out, because he's a thief. He stole from the Reverend, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, they do simplify it down to within a single day.
Ladies and gentlemen, our hero of the tale, he stole from the church.
It was his home. He had a bunch of sovereigns just laying in a sock drawer. So that's, if you don't want the Invisible Man to come and steal your sovereigns, don't put it in a sock drawer. Put it in the church. Tithe it all.
Amen. Praise the Lord.
Amen. Praise the Lord. So the movie does, have him just, making a mess. And that is what kicks him out.
I will stop you for one moment. He did steal money from the bank and threw it all over the ground.
Much later in this movie.
Did he make all the people that were walking by the real thieves because they didn't pick the money up and go, hey, let's take it back to the bank, which is 10 feet over that way. They went, oh, I'm rich. Oh, I'm bloody rich. And they just went, run off with it.
It's free money.
It's, I will tell you, if this was done in a modern way, bank bills many times can be marked so that if you steal the money from the bank, they will know it. They can say any money that went out at this time is considered stolen. So
another thing that this movie changes is that Mrs. Hall was not as annoying in the book as she is in this movie. She is just so annoying.
I think
it's for the greater good that the book was much better and Mrs. Hall was much more nicer.
Una O'Connor, she does play that up kind of in the annoying voice. I noticed she wasn't very annoying until her husband caught a wallop on the head, and then she's like screaming like that.
Just anytime she thinks about, his husband's injury, she wails.
Overacts. And she did it, I think she does something similarly annoying in Bride of Frankenstein. which we will see next season, I believe. But she's not annoying in any other role I've seen her in. I don't think she does any wailing or anything annoying in The Adventures of Robin Hood, but I haven't seen that for many, many years. By the way, if you want one of the greatest sword fights in cinematic history, we're going to see that in that movie. So,
keep with us, and we will...
Well, we'll also do Princess Bride years later, and that some people say that's one of the best. But I'm telling you, that one's a really great sword fight, but this one leaves it in the dust.
So, another thing is that they get rid of the character, for simplification purposes, of Thomas Marvel. So Thomas Marvel, in the book, he's kind of like a tramp, and he's the one who helps the Invisible Man to get his books back. He does betray him later, though, and the Invisible Man does not like that and wants to get his revenge and, murder him, addendum mortis. But in this movie, they just simplified to Kemp. I mean, Kemp would help later in the novel. He would be a later introduction in the novel, but in the film, he is the helper throughout all of it.
They kind of combine some of the things that Marvel does with Kemp.
And another thing is that they give him the first name Jack. This is not just the movie. I think they also did this in, the Great Illustrated Classics version. It's there. I think it's like, they added it after it was released to go, the name that he had in the original novel, he just was Griffin, Mr. Griffin, and it's more mysterious and more impersonal, and instead they add the name Jack. It makes it less so, and a bit more generic, obviously, since Jack...
In the comic book series, which of course it's very literary, but also pretty mature, buddy.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he's called Hawley Griffin, Hawley. But in the movie, they didn't have the rights to be able to do it in the movie version of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which they have this thief guy named Rodney Skinner, who steals the formula and starts using it to be a thief with it. He actually has a lot nicer personality than Griffin appeared to do in the book or the movie. It works.
But the name Jack doesn't really get used too much. I mean, we get Flora referred to him by Jack, obviously, because, she loves him and calls him Jack, but otherwise, everyone calls him just Griffin.
Speaking of Flora, is there a Flora Cranley in the book?
No, there's not. Neither is there a Dr. Cranley.
The Dr. Cranley, her father, either.
None of those really existed. They, I guess, needed a love interest for this type of movie.
What are some other movies that we have done that have been based off of books that appeared to add in a love interest? There was a love interest of Victor Frankenstein.
The Most Dangerous Game is one of them.
Wait. There wasn't a woman in The Most Dangerous Game?
No, there was not in The Most Dangerous Game.
That's a shame because Fay Wray was awesome in that.
Yes. And so was the episode.
So, go ahead.
Another thing is obviously the ending, or at least a section of the ending, as the ending is entirely different in the book. Whereas in the book... we had Kemp. He's being chased by the Invisible Man. It's very climactic, and he's yelling for the police, and then they manage to catch him, and then I think they all kick him and strangle him under a crowd, and that's the way he goes. But in this movie, Kemp actually does not live. He dies by a car, crashing down in the final moments of the movie, and obviously, they skirt him out of a barn as well. I think that was also a bit of that in the book, but Kemp stayed alive to the very end in the book, but not in the movie, though.
Yeah, of course, when you go over the plot, event by event, we'll go into that more.
Which, I'm doing right now.
All right.
So, the plot. First thing is we get, this animated, kind of thing. I think it's like swirling in the snow a little bit, but not like the letters, but I don't know. They're moving around, doing what they do. It's pretty cool. The NRA also has a plaque on this movie for no justified reason. As we saw in Son of Kong, that's where we first saw it, and we also see it in this movie as well. There's not very much reason for it, but hey, they wanted their name out there.
Yeah, I think that they were. It's very early on in the NRA, And honestly, they probably did not have a huge lobbying pull in the government like they do now. So they were probably just, for gun rights and gun safety. There wasn't a huge amount of money behind them, and all that like there is now. They were just an organization, probably bare bones.
So, first of all, we get a wintry night when I'm going to differentiate the two characters from the movie and the book, because I feel like they'd simplify him into, a universal monster kind of format. He's kind of more murdery and kind of more prankstery, and he laughs at things. So I'm going to call him Jack instead of, Griffin or Mr. Griffin, just to differentiate, the book version from the movie version, because I feel like they're different in many ways, making the book much better than the movie. Alright, got that? So Jack, he arrives to the Lion's Head Inn in the village of Iping, which is in West Sussex. I think the inn in the book is called the Coach and Horses Inn, if I can recall correctly, but...
Its first name is, which we'll get to that later.
Yeah, so he's getting really cold outside, and so he goes in, and he's like, I want a room and a fire. And these lines are obviously from the book. They're very famous lines. His first lines are, I need a room and a fire. And also, he wants to be left alone in his room. He won't allow people in there. He just wants to exist by himself. Mrs. Hall arrives with his luncheon, and unfortunately, she forgets the mustard. So she goes back up and delivers the mustard. Thing is, Jack wanted left alone so that he can eat without being discovered as invisible.
Yeah, she saw him with his bandage removed off of the upper and lower part of his mouth, and so it looked like he had this big gaping...
His big gaping hole, but then he hid it, and he was like, I told you to leave me alone. And she does take his hat and his coat, but then he says, leave the hat. So that's what she does. Later in the day, we get him experimenting, trying to, discover the cure. He doesn't really accomplish that. So, he just ruins the carpet in a fit of rage, spilling all of his cure, that wasn't successful. Mrs. Hall doesn't like that, as well as the fact that, he didn't pay his rent too much. So she goes and tells Mrs. Hall, you go up there and you evict him.
Oh, Mr. Hall.
Mr. Hall.
Right.
So Mr. Hall goes up, and he's like, I'm gonna evict you, and there's nothing you can do. Jack at first is, pleading with him. He's explaining he's had, a terrible accident, disfiguring his face, and his eyes as well. But since Mr. Hall won't give, he just chucks him down the stairs. And obviously this wasn't really done in the book. I guess he just, shoves him out of the room, but not like down the stairs, I don't think. Mrs. Hall, again, she's weeping over her husband's head, which has been damaged. The townspeople get a police officer to arrest Jack for this heinous crime. But Jack, laughing maniacally, takes off the bandages and goggles of his face and shows him who he is.
And what he is.
All right, you fools. You've brought it on yourselves. Everything would have come right if you'd only left me alone. You've driven me near madness with your peering through the keyholes and gaping through the curtains. And now you'll suffer for it. You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? All right, I'll show you. I'll show you who I am and what I am.
So the people now know he's actually invisible. He then sheds his clothes, making himself completely indistinguishable from oxygen.
Yeah, and this is a very famous scene, everyone. So when everybody watches this movie, this is probably the scene that they remember more than any other, that just really sticks with you.
It really does.
It's the first time you really see the effect, and you're like, even for something done in 1933, it's not bad. It's not, 2022's effects, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, so he snaps the policeman's neck. He goes about, pranking people, spilling over a baby carriage, stealing a bicycle, throwing a man's hat off of his head, and he vanishes into the countryside. Not that he wasn't already vanished at all.
He stole the bicycle from a character who was played by Walter Brennan, who became, like I said previously, became a much bigger star after this movie.
Yes, so then we get introduced to a Flora Cranley, and we also get introduced to Dr. Kemp and his assistant, Dr. Cranley, the father of Flora Cranley. Flora is very distraught by her love's disappearance.
He meddled in things men should leave alone.
What do you mean?
He worked in secret. He kept a lot of stuff locked in a big cupboard in his laboratory. He never opened that cupboard until he barred the door and drawn them blinds. Straightforward scientists have no need for barred doors and drawn blinds. He cares nothing for you, Flora. He'll never care about anything but test tubes and chemicals.
Cranley has also found a list of chemicals in Jack's lab. One of the ingredients is monocaine, which is an extremely dangerous drug previously used for bleaching. It was originally found in India. It grows in India. One time a dog ingested it, and it turned pure white and raving mad. The book had a similar thing where it had a cat being experimented on. You know, he poured the drug into cat food. It ate it. It was like a homeless cat, and it turned invisible, except for its irises, obviously, but it disappeared into the night.
Oh, that was in the book.
That was the book, but the movie has monocaine, which obviously does not exist in the book. Instead, he just goes mad by circumstance and not a drug that turned him invisible. But Jack, he didn't know it was dangerous and maddening. All he knew was it, bleached you. So I could probably use this in my drug, he said. And he turned himself invisible with it. So, the next evening, the day of his escape, we have Dr. Kemp. He's chillaxing at home. The radio then decides to talk about the Invisible Man, just for him to turn it off right in front of him. The Invisible Man is here, and he's forcing Kemp to become his partner so he can take over the world in a reign of terror.
One day I'll tell you everything. There's no time now. I began 5 years ago, in secret, working all night, every night, right into the dawn. 1,000 experiments, 1,000 failures. And then, at last, the great, wonderful day. Suddenly I realized the power I held. The power to rule, to make the world grovel at my feet. We'll begin with a reign of terror. A few murders here and there. Murders of great men, murders of little men, just to show we make no distinction. We might even wreck a train or two. Just these fingers round a signalman's throat. That's all.
But he left his, 2, not 3 like in the book, notebooks at the inn.
Jack is really bossy.
He is.
He's like, get me some, get me a this, get me a that.
He's trying to make sure that no one betrays him, to the police, and he doesn't want to be caught.
If you raise a finger against me, you're a dead man. I'm strong, and I'll strangle you. And if you try and escape by the window, I shall follow you. And no one in the world can save you.
So this kind of reflects a little bit of the book character. So basically they go out in a car, so he infiltrates the inn. Kemp is outside to watch. Inside, the police are investigating. They're asking around, going like, okay, so what actually happened here? The main man, he's thinking it's a hoax, but he's obviously not. But with the books given to Kemp, the Invisible Man then decides to show himself present and addendum mortis that officer. It just had to be done. It just had to be done. So this makes the news, and the Invisible Man then goes to Kemp and he says,
The food is visible inside me until it is digested. I can only work on fine, clear days. If I work in the rain, the water can be seen on my head and shoulders. In a fog, you can see me, like a bubble. In smoky cities, the soot settles on me until you can see a dark outline. You must always be near at hand to wipe off my feet. Even dirt between my fingernails would give me away. But these are trivial difficulties. We shall find ways of defeating everything.
So, some of that stuff that he talks about, where he talks about soot or snow or rain, I remember in the book he was saying, if I get rain on me, I'll look like a bubble, just a bubble moving through the rain.
Yeah.
I think he's a part where he's talking to Thomas Marvel about that.
Yeah.
And that's where they're kind of pulling some of that dialogue.
So, the police are then starting a search in a 20-mile radius in a cool montage-style bit showing them searching by foot, car, and motorcycle. I thought this was pretty neat. The whole village is on lockdown. The Invisible Man is at large. What's funny is they mix in the Invisible Man sleeping peacefully in the midst of the panic and the word of his danger.
Hey, up the door. Take no chances.
We'll be right back.
I'll keep him out.
While the Invisible Man is asleep, Kemp calls Cranley and the police to come to his house in secret because Jack is indeed there. But Flora, she persuades her father to let her come along with Dr. Cranley because, they know it's Griffin. She wants to see him again. While we do see men phoning in to give good ideas for capturing him, and from this we also know that there is a bounty as well on the Invisible Man. And then we also get that the police station, there's only 5 there when Dr. Kemp calls, so they'll have to wait for more men. So that's a bit of a delay. So at first, Jack is sus of him when he wakes due to the sound of Dr. Kemp's voice whispering into the phone. He's like, well, are you gonna betray me? And then he goes, no, I was just calling, Flora over to see you.
I was afraid. Wouldn't you be afraid if I were invisible like you?
There's no need to be afraid, Kemp. We're partners. Bosom friends.
He lets them off because of that. Flora then arrives to speak with him, pleading in vain for him to stop his reign of terror plan and to cure him of the invisibility.
I wanted to do something tremendous, to achieve what men of science have dreamt of since the world began, to gain wealth and fame and honor, to write my name above the greatest scientists of all time. I was just a poor, struggling chemist. I shall come back to you, Flora, very soon now. There is a way back, Flora, and then I shall come to you. I shall offer my secret to the world with all its terrible power. The nations of the world will bid for it, thousands, millions. The nation that wins my secret can sweep the world with invisible armies. Your father, clever? You think he can help me? He's got the brain of a tapeworm, a maggot, beside mine. Don't you see what it means? Power. Power to rule, to make the world grovel at my feet. Power to walk into the gold vaults of the nations, into the secrets of kings, into the holy of holies. Power to make multitudes run squealing in terror at the touch of my little invisible finger. Even the moon's frightened of me.
But then the police are closing in onto the house. And then Jack, he realizes, oh, I actually was betrayed. Hold on, get you to safety before I go out and deal with these bozos. And he also tells Kemp,
I've no time now, but believe me, as surely as the moon will set and the sun will rise, I shall kill you tomorrow night. I shall kill you even if you hide in the deepest cave of the earth. At 10 o'clock tomorrow night, I shall kill you.
It's a pretty good line. Before escaping the police, they're closing in. They have like a wall strategy by pranking him in various ways, squishing nose, kicking his rear, and picking him up by the pants and, swinging him around. There's a lot of fun there. And he just goes off on a spree. Just absolutely, addendum mortising the volunteer workers, trying to search for him. And he also derails a train by changing the track, which is obviously a fault of the engineers concerning that it's a bridge. There's literally no place that you can physically turn. Why would you put a turn there? It's the engineer's fault. But yeah, he flips the lever and the track goes to the left. The train goes off the bridge and it kills hundreds of people.
And I don't even know why. It's just he wants.
He's going on a reign of terror.
Now in the book he says he says Invisible Man the First, as if that's like almost like an emperor's title.
He does give, in the book he gives decrees, but he doesn't derail a train.
Does he? Okay, what is the worst humanly possible thing that he does in the book as opposed to the movie? Well, murder, but you have to say probably murder of a child or murder of, mass murder, like many people.
He doesn't really do that. I mean, he's gone after, previous people. He's overall just, getting revenge on the village overall in this movie. So
They've asked for it, the country bumpkins.
that's his overall plan, as well as in the book. But his overall plan is to get revenge on this village, and to make the news of the Invisible Man not escape. But overall, yeah, in the book he wants to be a king over this village, or I think it was a bigger town, like Burbank. I think he wanted to be king of Burbank, and to rule over it as the Invisible Man the First, as you said. But yeah, in this movie, he derails a train, he chucks 2 citizens off a cliff, he steals money from the bank and chucks it onto the pavement.
A present from the Invisible Man! Money! 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 Up and down the city road, in and out the eagle, that's the way the money goes, up goes the weasel! Money! 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 Money!
And it is just chaos. But however, the police have a plan to capture him, or are getting that together. This also is the small little scene where we get Dwight Fry, the reporter, inquiring for the paper, as Flora is also worrying about Jack. The police is making use of walls of men and dust on the rooftops to try and locate the Invisible Man.
What about those hoses? They have hoses with an ink in them?
They had ink hoses pointed toward the top of the wall, with all the policemen just pointing it at them. And there's a false alarm decoy with a cat that steps on the rooftops, and it disturbs the dust. And then the guy, he just goes, "Hey, the Invisible Man's here." I'm trying my best, okay?
I know. You're trying.
You can teach me how to do it a bit better later. But yeah, the cat gets squirted with an ink gun, and Kemp is being escorted in a queue of men to his house so he can drive away in his car to, who knows where, but just anywhere. I feel like, overall, there is a lot of complexity to the story in terms of, of course, there's a montage of, showing them a wide-scale 20-mile search for the Invisible Man, and, all the news that he's at large, the radio. It just feels like this huge event, and the police are, they're trying to deal with this Invisible Man. Thing is, they're not really competent police at all, in my opinion.
Not really, yeah.
Oh, I see. Pretty good.
But overall, you can just feel that there's a lot of complexity. They show the police doing their thing. They also show Flora, worrying about Jack and where he's at. You have the Invisible Man doing stuff. And, Kemp is also, worried as well. You get a ton of different complexities to this story, and I feel like we haven't really had that complexity overall to the story in any of the other movies we really did. This shows, just a ton of different events overall happening. They're trying to capture the Invisible Man. You can see the scale of it, and I think that's a really neat thing about this movie.
Well, I think what they're looking into is you can't see the threat, but what they can do is at least think. They're thinking. They're like, okay, if we surround Kemp and walk this way, he can't see us, and then
if they mess with him, yeah, you'll know. The police aren't too competent at this. I mean, it's a village, okay? It's a village. They're not bound to have too good of police, but they do eventually catch him later. They're competent enough to, protect their town the best they can against this threat.
I think what really sets them apart is they do have the help of the people in the town. That's, at least toward the end of the movie, they have, they can only do so much as a police force. But when they get the people together with them, but it does kind of feel like the end of Frankenstein. You've got people with metaphorical torches, and they're coming after somebody who was holed up in a house.
And then fire.
Yeah, and then fire. And James Whale knows all about all those things.
Concerning he directed that movie.
Yeah, yes, he did. So
he created that movie. So, So Kemp has managed to escape in a police costume over to, his car. He's getting it out of his garage and he's driving along the road away. It seems that he has victory. Thing is, the Invisible Man was hiding in the back seat, having tailed him all day. Oh no, what is he to do? So the Invisible Man, he just overpowers him, he ties him up, and he sends the car down with Kemp in it, down a steep hill, over a cliff in a massive fire, with no chance of Kemp surviving. I feel like the model work was pretty cool. I mean, they kind of did add the fire a bit too early, so it's like any collision, just fire, and you definitely know that there's a problem. But they also used the model work a bit for the train as well, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, the model work is not the greatest I've ever seen. I think that the larger you make the model, it's where it's not quite the size of what you would expect, but
it seems realistic enough though that you have like a train falling over. I mean, it's not like, toy physics or anything.
We're gonna see a lot of model work going forward, and some of it's really great, some of it's okay, and some of it's terrible.
But I feel like this one was pretty good. It's pretty believable.
It's not bad.
It's not too bad. So Kemp is dead as compared to the book. He's obviously not. This is the, final part of the movie. We've got a snowstorm. And Jack has to seek shelter, otherwise, they can catch him with his footprints. They can catch him, the snow resting on his body and the frost, turning him into a visible bubble.
One of the guys actually says he sees that the snow is starting to fall, and he's like, oh, this is perfect.
And there's also a little bit in this movie where he's running along in the snow, and there are some boys that chase his footprints, at least in the book, but it's also here in the movie as well, as far as I can tell. So he's gone to this random barn, and he's sleeping in it with the hay. He falls asleep later. However, the farmer, he enters his barn, rightfully so, and he spots him moving in the haystack in his sleep. And he's like, hey, I think this is the Invisible Man. And goes to the police, and, he says, hey, I've got something to tell you. There's moving in my barn. And that's kind of funny. And he's like, it's the Invisible Man, see? And so the police now know where he is. They then make a plan to, light the thing on fire, and it'll, chase him out. Obviously being that he doesn't want to die, so it'll make him have to come out, and then they can, shoot him, which is exactly what happens. They close on the barn in a big epic ring. Then they set fire to the building with some gasoline. The Invisible Man is forced out, and his footprints are now visible in the snow. The police chief then shoots him, mortally injuring him. And then we get this last final scene of the movie, where Flora is talking to him at his deathbed, and Jack, he sadly admits, I meddled in things that man must leave alone, his body becoming visible at his last breath. So, I feel like this is the end of, this movie, but it also feels like a signing off to this podcast season as well. There are definitely some great things to say about this movie. Obviously, you can get some complexity of action. Obviously, there's an Invisible Man, so they accomplished that when no one could have dreamed of it coming at the screen in the way that it does before, really, unless there were previous adaptations that weren't so popular. In the 1920s or something, I don't know, but there's overall lots to like about the movie. Obviously, Claude Rains with his gravelly voice, he does pretty well at the job.
Somebody has actually said that his voice is like graveled honey, or honeyed gravel, and I'm like, that's great.
That's pretty great. His acting in this movie,
his delivery is very nice.
He can definitely deliver all those rageful moments. And he's like, you're lying to me, are you? Well, you're gonna die at 10 o'clock. And it's pretty cool.
There is one thing I'll mention real quick. The first time that the Joker is introduced, or one of the first times the Joker is introduced in the Batman comic book, he tells a judge or some person of import to him that he is going to kill him, or he's going to die at like midnight on a certain day, and everybody is like all surrounding him, going, how is he going to do it? Oh, well, we can't let anything enter this room. No envelopes, no nothing, because he could put poison on the envelope. There's all this difference. How is the Joker going to accomplish this? So the Joker was more murderous in the Batman early on, and then he kind of became more of a prankster. But I thought it was very interesting. You don't know how Griffin is going to accomplish this. Where is he?
You get more of this in the book, that's what makes the book really great, and the movie kind of inherits it a little bit. I've said a little bit of what I thought, but my question is, what did you think of this movie and a ton of its scenes?
Well, I thought that in the book you get more of his narration of how he created the formula and how he tested it early on, and I found that fascinating, especially when he's talking about refraction of the skin and all those different things in the book. But I liked the movie. I did find that it was an actor's movie. There were some action scenes in it, but they weren't plentiful. The full extent of what you deal with when you deal with an invisible man, I've seen some different portrayals of that later, in other media that were really, really good and interesting. But I think this one is more of a suspense thriller, but it's got those acting moments that those actors can really dig their teeth into.
Here we go gathering nuts in May, nuts in May, nuts in May. Here we go gathering nuts in May on a cold and frosty morning. Whoops!
It is kind of more the horror side rather than science fiction that we get in the book. But another thing is, Dr. Kemp, he does a pretty good job, but he's not so scared of the Invisible Man. You don't get too much of that. In the terms of using green screen or replacing an actor with another actor, you would say that the actor's reacting to X. So in this case, he'd be reacting to the air. So how could you be scared of the air or give a good performance, really? But it's multiple factors, but that's a little bit of it. For instance, if you're doing the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, you would have the actor for the human looking at, some sort of doll or something, or a big figure made out of.
Well, they usually have a stick or something like that with the little tennis balls on or something like that, so they have eyes that they can look at. That's how they do it.
And with that, it's very hard to get, unless you're really, really good at acting, it kind of, the different scales of, being able to react to this and, have an emotional connection with something like, for instance, Sonic the Hedgehog, establishing a relationship with, a character that you haven't seen and will not see until you see the movie. So
what? Now, here's the other thing, too. I just was thinking about how do they react to the air? Well, just like the character would, because you look around going, where is his face? Where is his eyes? Is he looking at me? This is really weird.
But we got a lot more, you've got a lot more scaredness when the Invisible Man is present in Kemp's house in the book, especially since, when he discovers him, he's, trying to, yell for the police, and he's, all scared and stuff. And the Invisible Man has to, muffle him and keep him still on the bed during this first encounter. And overall, when the Invisible Man is, dressing, he, just pours it over in his head. He's like, what on earth is happening? And the news is saying all this stuff, man. It's just, how on earth could this be? And you can see the terror. But you get some terror a little bit, especially later in the film with Dr. Kemp.
It's Griffin, and he's threatening to murder me. He may be here now, beside us, or in the garden, looking through the window, or in the corner of my bedroom, waiting for me, waiting to kill me, and you all sit there doing nothing, nothing!
In this movie, but the book, definitely you can see a bit more of that terror. Dr. Cranley's an actor, and not so much. I don't know if he's such a good actor, but he didn't really do too much action.
He's not really a big focus of the movie.
He's not too much of a focus
He
of the
does
movie.
a better job, I think. When I saw him as Clarence in It's a Wonderful Life, he did a better job as that. But of course, if you're playing with Jimmy Stewart he lifts everyone up around him. He's so good.
And if you're playing a side character, you don't need to put too much effort to it, but, as he's explaining monocane and all that stuff, it's kind of a little bit, script ready, I guess.
Maybe this is not his wheelhouse. I also found Kemp as an actor was okay. And, and honestly, not to bag on Gloria Stewart, but she did all right.
Gloria Stewart was Gloria Stewart.
She did all right, but I really think the standout is absolutely Claude Rains. This is why this was his first role in America, and you're like, I can see why this guy was going places.
And I could also see why this movie did successfully, because it's just all the factors compounding into this amazing movie. And plus the book as an idea is amazing, so therefore the movie inherits that amazingness.
I think so, as long as you're pretty faithful to the book, and I think that it was...
The sequels obviously do diminish, because they're obviously not faithful at all. They literally take nothing.
The only thing they take from it is invisibility and a serum, and that's about it. And basically they were just using the effect in different other locations. There's even one where the invisibility formula, the Axis powers, the Nazis and the Japanese, they want the serum so they can use it during World War II. There's a little bit of a spy angle to that. But and then there's other ones where they find a comedic element in it. But honestly, I'm just like, okay, they're okay. They're not highly memorable. I honestly, I couldn't barely remember any of the plot of the other sequels. So honestly, if, Vincent Price is in one of them, and Vincent Price is very memorable and very good at whatever he does. He's Vincent Price. He does a decent job, whatever is put in front of him. But if you don't like those movies and you want to bag on them, let's bag on them.
But this movie, despite a little bit of some things that it loses out on, definitely compared to the book, it's a pretty great movie. I feel like it's definitely up there with, Frankenstein and stuff. That's why we put it, as our theme song currently, because, that quote is just so good and the movie is so classic.
I would definitely, when you think of the top Universal monsters, you think of the Wolfman, you think of Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Invisible Man, the creature from the Black Lagoon that we'll see later. Those are my core creatures. To be honest.
But speaking of classics, Dad and I, since this is the final episode, are going to reveal our plans for our bonus features that we're planning to do in between this season and the next season. It'll be awesome. And, drum roll, please.
Do you want me to do it?
You say it, yeah.
Okay. Drum roll. Yeah. I don't want to hit the mic on this. So, like William had said earlier in the podcast, we wanted to do. I had an idea to do it as themes. So we would do a set of 4 movies as a theme, and as we go, we're gonna hint at some future bonus episodes. These are ones that definitely have a connective tissue to them. The first one that we'll do is William called it Cinematic Classics. I was thinking of what could we call it. He said Cinematic Classics.
So we're doing Cinematic Classics Month. Be prepared for some, classic movies. And we will also list here in no particular order. First of all, let's say we've got Night of the Hunter.
Night of the Hunter is directed by Charles Laughton, who was, Dr. Moreau. And it stars Robert Mitchum, one of the very, very famous actor from that time. It's like a suspense thriller, and it's got some dark elements to it that are very memorable. And I think that this movie, as we talked about before in the
Island
of Lost
Souls.
We talked about this movie when we talked about Charles Laughton. But this movie wasn't very well received at the time. They didn't really give it a chance. But as the years have gone by, people have seen it and went, this is really good. So honestly, sometimes art is not always appreciated in the time that it's given. Another one is Fritz Lang's M. We talked about Fritz Lang. He did Metropolis.
This is a German film that is very good and popular among, filmophiles. Enjoy this movie pretty well.
It's a very dark movie. It's very moody.
Well done.
Yeah, it stars Peter Lorre, very famous for different roles. We will actually see him portray a Japanese character. He's not Japanese. He portrays a Japanese character in The Invisible Agent, but he also portrayed a Japanese character, kind of a detective character called Mr. Moto, and that's where they got the idea to have him be that. But in this early role, he plays a German man who is not up to any good.
And the third one, in no particular order, is Treasure of the Sierra Madre. We've been kind of hinting about Humphrey Bogart, and there's some good movies in there. In particular, you've got Casablanca. Dad didn't want to do that one, so we're doing Treasure of the Sierra Madre. You will get your Humphrey Bogart after all.
Yes, and it has a very, very famous line in it, and we'll talk about that line later. But
the last, but definitely not least, that we're also listing here as for Cinematic Classics Month is Citizen Kane. We've also been talking about this movie a little bit more as we've been going on. But yeah, we've been planning to do Citizen Kane, widely considered the best movie in existence.
It's directed by and stars Orson Welles, who famously is a perfectionist. Every frame on the screen he planned out meticulously. He knows what he wants to do. Everything that graces the screen has a purpose to it. As you know, these different movies each have something interesting to say. They're not necessarily connected thematically. I guess we might be able to find a through line of theme through these.
The through line is that they're cinematic classics.
They're really good, and they are classics of the yesteryear of Hollywood. Some of our other thematic months we've talked about are going to be very interesting. They could have something to do with the far off land of Japan, or they could have something to do with wax on, wax off. Who knows?
And we will have even more to come as we, fit them into our ideas and pick some movies. But yeah, this has been season 1 of Cinematic Fantastic.
We hope you've enjoyed it. We really. William has worked so hard. He's grown so much as an editor.
And especially since, as it's August and it's getting toward, back to school, that's the overall what the month is about. I'll be busy with school until summer. Keep expecting us, and we will release episodes all the same. So just be patient with us.
Yes, and we will, William. We will try to announce when the bonus episodes are coming out. Some people go to our blog, some people go to the Facebook. I think we're going to announce it on the blog and the Facebook when the bonus episodes are coming.
So stay tuned for that.
Yes, and the season 2, we will kind of let you know what is going to be coming up in season 2, which I'm sure you're going to like. I know there's a lot of good stuff in there. Now, here's the thing. We're not taking a hiatus in between seasons of like 4, 5, 6, 7 months. No. I mean, we're taking some time off because we've really put these episodes out pretty faithfully every week or every week and a half since January, I think. So we're going to take a little bit of time off. Not much, but some. But do realize that we are coming back, stronger than ever, and with some really interesting things that you may never have seen before. Some hidden gems. Maybe there's some that are your favorite or will become your favorite. I know that I'm certainly looking forward to some of these coming up.
And it'll be pretty cool. So
what a journey this has been, William.
It's been such a journey. So, to cap this off, I'm going to say this has been Cinematic Fantastic Podcast with your hosts, Jason Weatherford and William Weatherford. Get ready for opinions, dad jokes, and bad jokes as we continue later to watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear
to the new favorites of today?
Yes.
Right. This has been season 1. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hey, go back and binge all these episodes, and it'll remind you of what a journey this has been, and where we've come so far, and we have yet still more land to cover in this journey that we're on to the promised land.
The promised land, huge tracts of land to cover. But until then, this has been us.
This has been us. Have a good one, and we will see you soon. Be on the lookout for our bonus episodes. We will announce it, and be patient. Season 2 will be forthcoming. We will give you announcements when that is. But till then, have a good one.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter @cinematicfanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.